Today I'm joined by Brian Liebenberg, former French international.
Everybody loves to hate the South Africans because they are the best.
No matter which country we're playing in, the media's out to get us. What is the attention span right now of a professional rugby player?
Our attention span is now as long as that of a goldfish. It's very difficult for us to stay focused for, a longer period of time. Everybody's looking for another way to become competitive, or get a competitive advantage. Everybody's looking a little bit to the domain of, the mental side of things. It's just brain training.
Hi everybody and welcome back to the Coach G Show. Today I'm joined by Brian Liebenberg, former French international, 3-time top 14 champion and one of the sharpest minds in the game. We talk about his journey from South Africa to France, the golden era at Stade Français, the injury that ended his career and how he rebuilt himself by creating Catch and Think, a cognitive training method now used by athletes, schools and major companies. This episode dives into vision, attention, decision-making, and how players can train their brains to perform under pressure. Let's get stuck into it with Brian Liebenberg. Brian, brother, great to see you. How's things going?
V, all good. Nice to catch up again and then share a little bit of what's been going on in the last couple of years with you. So thanks for having me on the show.
It's awesome, man. I know we haven't caught up in a while. We've missed each other a few times at Stade France, but definitely walking the streets in Paris. I had some amazing memories going back to 2009 with our man. We won't go into the details there, share with the audience what we got up to, but it was unbelievable. Brian, how's things going? What have you been up to? Where are you now at the moment?
All good, G. I'm actually on the road now, so that's why I'm coming to you sort of on the mobile format. We're on the road. We do a lot of coaching in companies. So I'm actually in a nice wine area in France, which is Dijon, so close to some good French wines.
Okay.
And we'll be here for today, and then we're on the road for a little bit. But all good. Very happy. I can maybe share a little bit later a few of the projects that we're busy getting up to. We're actually setting up a nice training center in Crete, so in one of the Greek islands. I might go into, like I said, a bit more detail later as I tell you a bit more of what we've been doing. But all good. Happy to be on your show. Happy to speak to everybody, and hopefully it can be useful to some of your listeners.
Yeah, definitely. And Brian, obviously we've seen a lot happening, and you were following some of the games with the French team in the November Test series, and obviously a lot of controversy around South Africa at the moment. They're doing really well, and I get this feeling that no matter which country we're playing in, the media's out to get us. And we saw the French media with the hype before the game, accusing the South Africans of stealing the World Cup. Do you agree with that statement that they made, that South Africa stole the World Cup in 2023?
We both played in France, so we know how emotional the French are. And I think having the World Cup, the last one before that was 2007. So, coming around to 2023, that was their chance to become world champions. I mean, they've been so close. Many World Cups. They're probably the team that has got the best track record in World Cups, if you're looking at where they finished, obviously, over history. So, I think we can understand where they're coming from, feeling that the South Africans robbed them. Maybe they could have said that the South Africans could have given them one back after what happened down in Durban in 1995, where we could maybe also, debate about whether there was a try or not that got South Africa into the final. But just emotional, very passionate supporters, and wanted their team to obviously make it to the final. But we can talk about that for hours. I think unfortunately they thought they were world champions before the time and underestimated maybe the road that needed to get them to the final. And then still, everybody wants to be world champion. It's such a big tournament now for all the nations, and I think we've seen over the last couple of years that the teams are now, I think maybe bringing in technology, preparation, things like that. They know each other so well, so the margins are so much smaller. So it's going to come down to details, and every time I get up, we were both at the stadium, and, you got predominantly French supporters in the lodges when they listen to us speaking. And then it's always a fun icebreaker when you say, was Cheslin Colby, did he start before Tomo Ramos, went for his conversion or not? And that gets them all going, but they're still very, very alive in their minds and in their spirits. But I think a little bit unfair, but I think it's more just the emotions talking. We love the French. We've got a great relationship with them over the years, in the big matches. Many South African players coming to play in France. We've had a couple of their legends playing in South Africa. So I think, that's rugby, and that's what makes it all so much more interesting, before the big test matches. And I think for now, with the South Africans, where they are now, not only with the French team, but every team they come up against, there's a huge hype. Everybody maybe loves to hate the South Africans because they are the best, but everybody's buying the ticket and they're sitting in the stadiums because they want to see how these guys play, because what they're doing, and I think everybody can agree, it's just unbelievable. So it's great to see, but we're also still rooting everybody for their team to try and beat the South Africans.
No, for sure, Brian. But I want to come back to you, Brian. You were part of a Stade Français team in which they call the golden era. I think, we always talk in South Africa about the Bulls dynasty and about all the players that came through. But you played in the era at Stade Français, which I think was impressive. Obviously, us being in South Africa, when we used to watch the game, we saw the pink jerseys and we saw all the spectacles and stuff. But take us back to that period, playing for Stade Français, winning those back-to-back top 14s. How did that feel?
Amazing. That is one of my best rugby memories ever, is lifting what they call the Bouclier de Brennus. That's the trophy. It's a big piece of wood. And that's what any French player dreams of winning. So winning that was definitely a highlight for me in my career. The first one was in 2003. And it all started exactly like you said, with a guy called Max Guazzini, who was the president of a big radio station in France. And he brought all this, a different way of looking at rugby. He would do the pink jerseys. He would have the pom-pom girls. There would be a theme at the games. And he started this club. And what is interesting about Max is he didn't really pick players on, maybe not the best players. He picked guys that did things a little bit differently.
Okay.
And one of those guys that sort of led the way was Christophe Dominici, who sort of, he was the symbol of what Stade Français was, a little guy that could do great things. In this club, we actually in those days didn't have many true Parisian supporters. So whenever we played against other teams, we were always sort of fighting against bigger teams or bigger crowds than ourselves. And that, I think, having these different sort of characters, guys that came out of nowhere sometimes, getting together under Max, who was sort of an unconventional president at that time, or at any time in rugby, bringing in pink jerseys. I mean, who would have thought pink jerseys would have had such a success? The guys are still playing in pink today, So it's nice to see that what he did and what we did as players in those days sort of live on now in the Stade Français culture. But it was truly amazing. And Nick Mallet actually was the coach. Okay. So the first year when I came to Stade Français, Nick Mallet coached us for actually the 2 titles in 2003 and 2004. And it was just an honor for me. I was still a young player at the time. So coming up from Grenoble, I played in Italy and then in Grenoble, and then got the opportunity to move up to Stade Français. And I sat in the change room with players that I've been looking up to or been watching on TV, for the past 5 or 6 years in my life. So you're looking up to players and all of a sudden you're sitting next to them in a change room. These guys are French legends playing for the French team. I can name also even Peter de Villiers that went on to have more than 70 caps for France, and these guys are now, you're playing with them, and it's sort of humbles you a little bit, but also I think makes you a better player. And the team, like I said, once again, bringing all totally different characters together under what we could name maybe a crazy president in Max Guazzini. It just worked. So that's the proof that sometimes, you don't have to sort of be in the mold or sort of be what people expect you to be for a team to be able to be successful. So that in the first victory that we had, or the first win of the French championship in 2003, and all the 10 years that I spent in Stade Français was definitely, I think looking back now, we can consider ourselves being part of that club and that team and that era as very lucky, like I'm sure you and a couple of the old players from the Bulls can do when you look back and see what you actually achieved. Because when you're in action, you can't really take a step back. But now when you maybe see photos or meet up with old friends, it's good memories.
It's so true. The great thing that I like about podcasting is getting to catch up with with friends that I haven't seen in a while, and former teammates and colleagues as well. It's just unbelievable. And recently I had Basil Karsis on the podcast as well. I'm not sure if I've released it. Maybe I let that one slip now. But we were reminiscing about the good old days. I asked him his insights, what happened behind the scenes with the coaches, because we did have an unbelievable team. And I don't talk about this because I want to showcase or boast what we achieved. It's just because it was actually really unbelievable. We had a great group of guys that enjoyed being at the club, that really wanted to work hard. And we summarized it's about pushing the standards. What would you say was the reason that back then you guys were so successful? What was the reason? I mean, obviously Max Guazzini did things differently. There's a lot of stories out there, the way you guys went about doing things. I remember there's apparently some stage there was a statue in the locker room when you guys came back. I don't know if you played back then, but you can maybe tell us about that story. But what would you say is the reason that you guys were so successful in that era?
Yeah, I don't know. I think going back to the statue, I think that's referring to Max Guazzini. Came from the show business background, and he was very close to Dalida, which is a very, very famous French singer. And he actually brought in one of her dresses to the change room.
Okay.
That was one of the things that he sort of did to maybe bring him luck. I know he also went to fetch some holy water from Lourdes,
okay,
the holy city, where he would then also throw there on the field before we played finals. So he had all these sort of traditions and superstitions that that would bring a bit of luck to the team. So maybe it worked, but I think it was, like I said, once again, just doing things totally different. And we had what made it work for me, at least when I arrived, was I think we had a sort of an invisible confidence that came out. We knew some way someone would step up on the day and make it happen, and we would just follow these, like I said, these characters that didn't worry about not being part of the mold or not being sort of, your typical player at the time. And we would sort of follow these guys that were in the team because they led the way. The characters that they had were guys that weren't scared of anything, and we believed in ourselves. I'm not saying that it was easy in those days to win a championship title. It wasn't. Toulouse have always been a strong force in French rugby, and we came up against them a few times. We actually lost against them in the final for the European Cup. So we didn't only win in those days, but most of the times when we got to the final stages of the championship, it's sort of a new belief came out within us, and it made us stronger and it made us more confident. And we bounced off a little bit of each other, So it was really a team effort. And I'll go back again saying at those days, we didn't have a really big supporter group, It's grown over the years. A lot of people that live in Paris actually come from what they call in France, the Provence. So your other cities or towns that are not in Paris are sort of the south or the southwest. And so they'll come to the games, but they're not really true Parisian supporters. So like I said, I mean, sometimes we'd look around the change room with a few guys that, come down for a semi-final, that had joined us from the administration team. And that was it. That was us. I mean, you could put us all into 2 or 3 buses maximum, and you're getting supporters coming from Biarritz or Toulouse. You got 50 buses coming down to support the team. So we needed each other more than what other teams maybe did in those days. And that gave us a belief that we could count on each other and make it through those games. So it was, I'm even getting goosebumps when I'm talking about it now, because it really was that, just believing in ourselves and knowing that we could beat anybody on the day. And that culture was part of at least over those years when we were successful, definitely was a big part of the success.
And who would you say was except now yourself, who were some of the key players in that area? If you can maybe just share with our audience that it's in South Africa and in the UK, but who were the big players that played a massive role in that era?
So I was still quite young, so still learning a little bit. I was lucky, like you said, to play in that team and be part of that era. One of Max's favorite players, and a guy like I already mentioned, Christophe Domenici, was really this, like I said, not the biggest guy, but he would take on, there's quite a few photos of him and John Olomu that became quite close, after that famous test or the semi-final it was in London, where France beat New Zealand, and it summed it up by Christophe Domenici running around these big guys that were twice his size. So Christophe was a big part of the team in those days. And then you'd go on, who could I say? We had Fabien Galtier was still playing with us in those days. So you had a guy that, even when he was a player, understood the game very well, was very hard on himself and his teammates. So he was also, someone that was important in the team. And then what was nice, like I said, Max would choose guys that would come not only from France, but all over the world. He wasn't scared to get guys in from South Africa, from Australia, from Argentina. So we had a really good Argentinian base in our club at that time. So, I mean, legends of the game that played for Argentina, the Pumas, like Juan Martin Hernandez. I mean, he could play anywhere. I always used to say Juan, it was like he had hands or feet. He could pass the ball, kicking or passing. He could do anything. We had Augustin Pichot, who was also, really a really good captain for Argentina and brought that, that experience to the Stade Français team. Ignacio Coleto, Rodrigo Roncero in the front row. Those are guys that you'd rather have on your team than against you. And then we had, like a couple of the French, I mentioned a few French legends, guys that had played for France. Stéphane Glay in the centers. We had David Skrela, Julian Arias. I could go on. So, I mean, there were quite a few guys in the team, and everybody brought a little bit into the team, So, it was like I said, once again, I'd sit in the change room and you'd have a look around and you'd see guys, international players, guys that you're watching playing test matches. I did mention Peter de Villiers. We had Mike James, that was a great second row from Canada. I'm trying to think, when you're naming old teammates, you never want to forget anybody.
No, for sure.
No. It was a great team. We really had it was almost an international team, and just about every single position, we had an international player, whether it was for the French team, Argentina, Australia. We had a great guy, Mark Guazzini, come over from Rugby League to play with us. That was a little bit later on in my career in the Stade Français era. But so like I said, Max wasn't afraid to get guys in that sort of didn't tick the box. I don't know if I should say it to you, but the way Max would choose his players, you can say you could maybe cut it out if it's not going to be good enough. But,
we'll share it.
It just sums Max up, and he loved us, and we were. Max created a Stade Français family, and he looked after us like his children, and it was that was that nice, good family feeling, and I think that also helped us be successful because we all felt like we belonged and we could bring something to the club. And Max, so Max, a funny story. The manager at the time would, you'd have player selection. And they'd have a few CVs out, so maybe 3 CVs on the table for a position that they're looking at. And Max would say, I want number 3, third CV, I'd like this guy. And Alan, the manager, would say, but Max, if you look at the CV, he's not the best player. And Max would say, I don't care, he's the best looking, so I'm going for that guy. So, his criteria of picking players were totally different, but it worked. So, Max, and that takes you on to, you spoke about the pink jerseys and everything he did around the games. He also had the famous rugby calendar that came out, quite a few years.
Did you feature on it? I haven't seen it.
No, unfortunately, I wasn't selected neither for my good look or for, the criteria that needed for the calendar. But, that was all part of the Stade Français, being in a place like Paris, which is just a beautiful city, not only just from a rugby point of view, but then also just from a cultural and representing Paris when we were playing was really, really good for me. And looking back, good memories.
No, I just want to say thanks to you as well. I think after that experience I had with you guys in 2009, that made it easy for me to make that decision to come over to France. I wanted to experience that lifestyle. But, it's great to listen to that. But we all know that, rugby is not always that easy. And rugby is not always perfect. We go through ups and downs. There are times in our careers when we take a dip in performance, but then also times where injuries hold us. If you can take us back to that time, the end of it, did you have a career-ending injury, or was it just the multiple injuries that forced? Because you kind of retired slightly early. You were, I think, in your 30s, young 30s.
32. Gee, that's when I retired. But it was interesting because you have discussions with guys after the time, and it was actually Mark Lieberman that I was talking to. And, chatting and looking at statistics actually and seeing how long players actually have a career for. So you'd have a look at now in the professional era and, maybe some people could comment or say that it's not true. But what we spoke about is more or less an average player, in the professional era today is looking at anywhere from 8 to 10 years as a professional career. So I started, playing week in and week out from the age of about 19, already at a professional level, even though, basically a professional level, you're playing week in and week out. So that's already taking its toll on your body from a young age. And then I went up to 32. So to count about 13 years, more or less 12, 13 years of a professional career, which was, at the age of 32, maybe, and I did end on an injury, but I think that was due to the 13 years of playing, at a top level rugby. And like once again, I said week in, week out. So it was a career ending injury. I said I always would have loved to have finished my career in Italy. That's where I started my professional career. I would have loved to have finished there because of the Dolce Vita, the pizzas and the pastas. It's a beautiful life in Italy. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. But then also in sort of the middle of my career, near to the middle of my career, I had a back injury, which was also just from a bit of the wear and tear. And that was a little bit scary because there wasn't a ligament or something that would just a standard fix. I couldn't just go in for an operation and get it fixed up. So that not only on my body was difficult, it was also sort of mentally not knowing when and if I was going to get better to continue my career. So when I got through that injury, that was something really, really good for me. And I went on to play another 3 or 4 years, I think, after that. And then that got me to the age of 32, where, that was, you retire because just a knee injury. And I think at that point, like I said, when you're going through all the years playing, training, and you'll know the same as I'm sure many other players, I think at the end, it just gets tougher and tougher to get out of bed in the morning, train with the pain, play through some sort of injuries that are lagging and things like that. So I think at that point, I was sort of happy as well just to hang up my boots and say, I've done my time. I've experienced so much, met so many people. So that part that's, that I had as a professional rugby player, that career it wasn't like I regretted anything. If I had to stop on my back injury, I think I would have had some regrets and it would have been a little bit more difficult to sort of overcome. But no regrets. I think when the time came, it was, I accepted it and moved on from there.
Brian, obviously I was fortunate enough to spend some time with you. We did a few camps together and spent some time in Set as well. Unbelievable place with you and your missus. It was unbelievable memories and looking forward to reconnect. But I can only imagine it must not have been easy, after rugby. So you stopped at the age of 32. Did you have a clear plan in place in terms of what you wanted to do after rugby?
No. Gee, just going back, another little story I can tell. I don't need to remember, and hopefully this will make your listeners laugh a little bit. Where, it was, when we got back, and that was a little bit when me and you was sort of getting into the life after rugby, exchanging, doing a few things together, like you said. And I remember you came down to Set where we were planning and doing a bit of work. And I remember you phoning your wife and saying, "Listen, I can't come home today because it's snowing." And she thought you were lying because she thought we just wanted to, maybe have a couple more beers or drink some more wine or have a good time. And it literally went on the news and on BFM TV, that's the news channel, there was snow all over the south of France. I mean, that's like saying it's going to, snow in a place it wasn't. But I remember that story. So that was a good memory where she didn't believe you when you said it's snowing. And who would have thought up an excuse like that? But that was true. So,
before you carry on with what I asked you before, I mean, I still remember I had to put my phone on FaceTime back then. I had to video call and show her the news. She didn't believe me.
Yeah, it was already so there probably every 10 or 15 years. So there it's snowing in Set when you came down. So. No, gee, I didn't have anything planned, man. I unfortunately, like I said, it was an injury-ending career, so that didn't leave me much time to sort of prepare. I was hoping, like I said, to play to at least 35, which would have left me another 3 years to plan. And as we say to many players now, but when you're playing, you don't really listen to the old guys telling you, plan your career when you finish playing. You don't know what it's going to be like when you stop playing. And so you sort of maybe leave it to the last minute, or you don't take so much time to listen to advice that previous players could have given you. So no, I didn't have anything in plan. So when I did get injured, that was when I had to sort of have a good look and see what I was going to do. And I think it's important as well to move on to something different as soon as possible. You talk a little bit about mentally or mental health, and it's not easy. I think even if you do have something else to do when you stop playing, it's very difficult. So at least have something to do, but to adapt to a life after or away from rugby is not easy. And I've spoken to so many ex-players as well, even if you're coaching, even if you open up a restaurant, you're doing something else. There's always something that misses that we're missing about the days when you're training and playing and being together as a team. So yeah, I just had to think of something, and that's where I didn't, and you go back. So I left school and started playing rugby straight away, and then never studied. I think it's also a little bit of thinking that you're always going to make it and then not preparing maybe. So in the end, I had to find something to do, and that's when I thought about doing catch and think. So that's how I got it. Yeah, and moved onto the whole method or project that I've been working on ever since.
Brian, that's so true, because I think a lot of it, and that was even the case with me. It wasn't until I think the last almost year of my career when I knew, okay, it's a 50-50, whether Toulouse will give me that +1 option on my career. I'm like, oh shit, what am I going to do? I had no idea. I was passionate about rugby and eventually dawned on me that I wanted to become a coach. And, at that stage decided I want to be a real specialist coach and, help front row rugby players try and avoid what I experienced as a player. But it's not easy. Not every player has that luxury of figuring out. And I think you skipped a few steps, because I'm speaking to a lot of former players now, players that have recently stopped. A lot of them are lost, that they realize they actually don't, or they feel they don't have a skill set, but we actually do. With everything that we've learned in our career, the challenges we've overcome, we got leadership skills, we've got tenacity, we got robustness, we got loads of great qualities. And while I'm helping this former player kind of navigate this time in terms of, trying to figure out what he's going to do, I said to him, he needs to experience things, because it's tough when you don't know what you're going to do to actually just make a choice. So you need to experience things. You need to, meet people and see what they are doing. So obviously you develop this concept, catch and think, but was there maybe a trigger event or something that you did that led up to it, where you got this light bulb moment and say, all right, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to develop this ball. I'm going to develop this method. What interests me, and I think what I want to share with the audience, is that those little steps before. Obviously, we're going to dive deep into the methodology in terms of what you've created, but that little phase just before, where you realize, okay, this is what I can do now.
It might be a little bit like you got an exam on Monday morning, and Sunday night you're saying, I haven't been out all weekend, or haven't studied, and it's a little bit last minute, and it's a little bit of panic sets in. Maybe some people are more effective, last minute, and when you really need to get things done to do it. So that feeling of not being prepared, ending your career, and then saying, okay, what I got to do now? I got to do something. I don't have any qualifications. So you got to make a choice. You got to sort of give yourself a little bit of direction. And I think, like you say, a lot of players don't realize what qualities they have just from the experience that we had as players. And for myself, what I tried to do is always take a little something that was good from all the people that had an impact on your life. So mostly coaches, because those are the guys you're working with the most to develop your game and progress as a player. So I try to take a little something good from all the coaches that I had during my career. And one thing I was always passionate about was skill, working on my skills. I wasn't maybe the most accurate kicker. I had a bit of distance on my kicks, but, my catching and passing for me was very important. And one of my early coaches, Charles down in Durban, it was still at the Sharks, he told me, if you want to be a top player, you should be passing a ball between 200 and 300 times a day. So that stuck with me. And throughout my professional career, I would find somebody on the side of the field. Even when I didn't have somebody down in Grenoble, I'd pass the ball against a tree. And I actually had the technique for the ball to bounce back to me, and I would get my, but if you didn't have someone to pass you sort of find a solution. But, the 200 to 300 passes a day, that was something I did because, I wanted to be a good passer. So I was always passionate about skills, skills. So that was something that was important to me. And I just thought, I think when I stopped playing, I wanted to get away a little bit from the professional side. It didn't end up on the best terms with Stade Français, and I think also ending on a career-ending injury emotionally as well. I just needed to get away from everything that was the professional side of the game. And I thought, what do? You want to sort of still be part of rugby. You were lucky to have lived many different experiences. So give back a little bit to rugby, get back to the kids, to the roots of the game, try and give something back. And so I thought skills, what is a way that I can get skills across to the younger generation that could be fun and interesting and improve their game. And I was maybe also in a day a bit of what would be considered as quite a physical center. There weren't many centers that were over 100 kilos in those days. So, we'll talk to guys like Matthew Buffalo that I played with. When we played together in the center pairing, we were bigger and heavier than the two props. So it was like sort of the world upside down. It was crazy. So, but people would see me as a physical player, but I always wanted to be considered as someone that could also have good passing skills. So that's what I wanted to get across to the younger generation. And I think when you say to a kid when he's 7, 8, 12 years old, you got to do 200 or 300 passes a day. Those guys, they just want to enjoy it. They just want to have fun. And that's where I got this idea. I said, how can we make skill training fun for the kids? And it just came to me. I said, okay, well, and that's how the method started. Let's get a game on the rugby ball that not only one can make it fun for kids to work on their skills, but also be a good way to promote the game of rugby. So we've got the catch and think method that we've got now. There's a game that uses the method, and that way we can actually, develop players through having fun. They're working on all the different passing techniques, and then we'll go on a little bit. I'll explain how that also needs them to be focused and pay attention to what they're doing, and that's the cognitive development and training that we've then developed into a method that we use now. So yeah, that was it. Get a game on the ball that makes it fun and easy to progress, but then also to promote rugby. And I think that's an important thing. If we love the game of rugby, we want as many kids to pick up a ball. One of my first Christmas presents, we're getting closer to Christmas now, was a rugby ball. Yeah. One of the old leather rugby balls that we had. And I think a rugby ball is such a connecting symbol for so many reasons. And we actually did a brilliant day in a school that is down in Austin, Texas, where those kids, they don't even know what rugby is. And within about 10 or 15 minutes, these guys are spin passing, offloading, and playing the game. It was so beautiful to see and connecting different cultures, and that's what a rugby ball does. So that for me has always stuck with me from my youngest age, getting a rugby ball, playing rugby, and then now being able to, through this game that I've, put onto a rugby ball, be able to share that with kids. And it's actually great because one of the best things I've seen is at the few sessions, whether it be schools or rugby clubs, is you explain it to 4 or 5 kids, and some other kids come in and join. And I don't need to explain it. The kids are explaining the game to the next ones, and it's just beautiful. And then they're all playing together. So yeah, there's been some really good experiences like that around the game that I put in place. But I actually told one of my uncles in South Africa, I explained the ball and I said, this is what it does. And he said, did you do this? And I said, yes. And he didn't believe me. So I think a little bit he didn't believe that I had enough mental or brain power to be able to think of something like that. But that was the start of the journey. Yeah. Gee, that was where back in the day we called it play ball.
Play ball, yeah, I remember.
Because I wanted, just to play, get the ball, bring the rugby back in. Nowadays I think if you want to play rugby, you have to be in a club, you have to have a coach, you have to have a rugby field. And I want to do, I don't know if it was the same for you, but in South Africa, put a ball down and you find a park or a beach or anywhere, it's beautiful. You see kids, they get into an airplane and they put in the rugby ball up in next to the hand luggage, and just having a ball in your hand the whole time and be able to use it in any way you want is something that I wanted to get back for kids to be able to do. So today, playing this game on the ball can be played anywhere. We're using it in parks, on beaches, some of the schools that have only got a concrete sort of play area. We can do that there as well. We've got boys playing with girls. We've got older kids playing with younger kids. We've got, once again, like I said, different cultures. So sometimes we've got people that don't speak the same language, but if they understand the rules of the game, they're playing the game together. So it's really, really nice to see and been a really enriching experience, being able to do that. And once again, like I said, so we got the game on the ball. And it was very interesting. So I'm sorry, I'm speaking a bit much.
No, go for it.
So we got the game on the ball. I mean, we must have seen over 25,000 kids in France, helping the coaches as well, teaching the coaches a little bit about, how to do a spin pass, an offload. So helping amateur coaches as well in, just in upskilling them a little bit on at least the technical side. And some guy, I've always, like most maybe coaches or people that are interested, always looking for new things. And we were contacted by guys from Switzerland who work, which is where we actually got to today. So I'll get to that as well, is working on concussion. So players returning to play after concussion. And they said to us, this was the phrase they actually said to us. They said, if kids in school play with this game 20 minutes a week, they'll get better results at school.
Wow.
And we said, hang on, can you say that again? And they actually needed to explain it to us. And that's actually, I don't know, just a moment when everything sort of clicked. And he said, okay, we could be onto something here. It's the cognitive side. So kids, to be able to play the game, need to pay attention. They need to be focused. They need to, pay attention to what they're actually doing. So just to explain it very quickly to you and all the listeners, the ball's got colors, and each color is linked to a skill. So the rule of the game is the rule of thumb. I like to say it in English because it's a bit of a play on words. The rule of thumb: when you catch the ball, your right or your left thumb will automatically touch one of the zones on the ball. So if I'm landing on the yellow zone with my thumb, if my thumb touches the yellow zone, I would then have to do a spin pass to pass the ball on to the next player. And that's where the cognitive side comes in, because our brains, the way they work is they take in information, they analyze, your brain makes a decision, and then you pass into action. So that whole circuit of taking in, analyzing, deciding, and acting needs attention for you to complete the circuit. So for these young kids to be able to understand that, or to actually execute the spin pass, they would have had to gone through that circuit, but paying attention to what they're doing. If they're distracted or thinking of something else, or that circuit breaks at any one of those levels, they won't be able to play the game correctly. So that's actually, through the game, is reinforcing their capability to pay attention and concentrate. And one of the biggest problems now that many people speak about is attention for the young kids, because they're unable to pay attention long enough to learn something. Because for many reasons, you can go down to whether it's social, screen time, just the world we live in today. Our attention is one of the biggest, how can I put it? One of the most important things that sort of runs our lives. So your
attention real estate
is determined by your attention. So we talk about the attention market when it comes to marketing and things like that. But for kids, we now have a game on a rugby ball that can be played by, once again, like I said, boys and girls, anywhere they want to. But at the same time they're playing the game, they are actually reinforcing what, their brain, which we can consider like a muscle, to be able to focus, to avoid distractors, to understand. So we also explain to the kids, so from an early age, they can also understand, how to focus, how to, concentrate on something, and then actually repeat that to be able to get better. So not only from a rugby and a promotion of the sport, I think it's also helping kids or equipping kids with the capabilities that are going to help them, succeed in life. If from an early age you understand how to control and decide what you do with your attention, and how to learn or progress in your academic life or in anything that you're doing, I think those are tools that will help you not only during your school days, but your university days and your professional life after that. And that's the beauty of this method that we've put in place, is we can use it for kids, as early as 5-6 years old. And then we're going through to professional amateur, professional rugby players. And then we're using it in companies as well. And we've got the whole method being used by a physiotherapist for, obviously return to play after concussion, long return after long-term injuries, then also for cognitive decline. So from the point when you realize our brain and our attention is involved in everything we do, all the progress that we need, all our learning, playing, sport, performance, productivity. And if we know how to control and handle our attention to maximize our potential, it's, everything we do in this world will just be exponentially better from that.
Brian, there's a lot of information there. So I maybe want to try and break it up a bit for our audience, because I think it's brilliant what you've created, I remember some of the games we played in the rugby camps, and, just that complete distraction. Sometimes, you're focusing on the color, and then there was a cone, you had all these different drills out there. And I think the question I have is, and because obviously you spoke about attention, and I obviously did a bit of research. I checked out your website on Catch and Think, and I realized there's different forms of attentions. And I've also read up, you guys mentioned that there is attention span has obviously shrunk over the years with players, and like you've just mentioned, whether it's not due to social media or screen time, all those type of things. But I think the question I have is, because being a coach, obviously we as coaches, we have this burning desire to give as much information as possible to players, because we believe the more information we give them, the better they will be prepared. But that's not always the case, because realizing that sometimes the players don't have a long attention span. Sometimes the window you have is maybe 60 seconds, maybe it's 3 minutes, maybe because you have worked with professionals and scientists, and maybe you can maybe give us more accurate stats in terms of, in your opinion, number one, what is the attention span right now of a professional rugby player or rugby player having that ability to absorb information in a meeting? Okay, that's the first thing. And what can we do to improve that attention span so they are capable of absorbing that information?
Oh, okay. So there's many things. What I've had a look at least when it comes to rugby at all levels, is how can we understand how the brain works to put that into service for or help the performance of the players. So you got to understand that the brain is a little bit lazy, we can say it like that. So it only likes to do one or two things at a time. So like you said, if you want to get you want to help your player, you want them to run straight, you want them to catch early, you want to pass, you want to keep up the speed of running. That's a lot of information. So what you actually have to look at is less is more sometimes. So what I always tell the coaches is, if you give too much information, the cognitive load is too big, and then the brain just says stop. So the brain just shuts down, and then nothing more is going in, because exactly like you say, too much information. So what I say is, try and focus on 1 or 2 points in a warm-up or in a training session. Focus on those points. What happens is, and that's why I say when kids don't pay attention long enough to learn something, you actually need to repeat things. So we talk about in the brain, the procedural memory. So when you repeat things a few times, you don't have to think about it as much. So your prefrontal cortex, he's the one, managing all that information coming in, sending off different information to the different parts of the brain to be able to catch and run. So you only want them to be thinking about 1 or 2 things. Once you've mastered it or repeated it enough times, it becomes automatic. So you don't have to think about it. It's not using up that much energy to really focus on catching or running straight. So once that's into your procedural memory, when it's been sort of engraved into your memory, you need less energy to think about it. And then you can add on another step. Then you can add on precision passing, or you can add on, keep the pace while you're running. But if you're telling a player, once again, catch early, run straight, keep up the pace and pass precisely, the brain's not going to be able to do that. So what you should do is then just, stick to 1 or 2 bits of information per training session until it's become automated in the brain. And then you can add on another bit of information. And it's the same process over and over. So don't give too much information, because the brain doesn't like it. So stick to 1 or 2 bits of information, reinforce that, repeat it, and then you can add on more information when you can see the players are actually doing that, sort of a more automated state. And that's what we're bringing to our method, is that progressive cognitive load. It's exactly the same thing. So we'll start off with something easy, and then slowly but surely give the brain more bits of information to treat. And it's just that procedural memory that then makes it easier for players to then take on more information. So you said, how much time does it take for player, what's that window where players stay focused? It's getting less and less. There's a great article or book that came out from the Google engineers that did a study, and they reckon that, a goldfish has a time span of 9 seconds, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 7 seconds, and humans have now gone to also about 7 or 9 seconds.
Wow.
So basically saying that our attention span is now as long as that of a goldfish. so how do you get that better? It's exactly the same as training your muscle. I always bring it back to the same as training physically. If we're asking guys to do a 15K run without any training, that's not going to work. So you want to build it up. And it was a great exercise that, Andrew Huberman, I don't know if you follow him, but he's a great...
I do his NSDRs, non-sleep deep rest protocols.
Well, there's many things that I find interesting. And he just said, what you can do is just sit in a room, focus on something, and for 2 minutes, try not to think of anything, and it's difficult because this, things are all happening the whole time around us, but it's very difficult for us to stay focused for, a longer period of time. So it's just brain training. That's all it is, So what we're actually working on with now, I'm lucky to be back at Stade Français as a consultant for all the cognitive training. And we've taken the statistics from a game. So your phase play or any play that is on a rugby field now is more or less between, 40 seconds and a minute. So we sort of base it around 45 seconds. So all of the cognitive training levels that we put the players through, we try and make it at least or a minimum of 45 seconds. And why do we do that? Because we need the players to be able to stay focused for that amount of time. When they're playing on a field, if they lose their focus after 15 or 20 seconds and need to come down to make a decision, and they're not focused on either the play, the defense, or the tactics of the team, that brings mistakes, and then that brings problems for the team. So we're working on to try and prolong their capacity of staying focused for longer periods of time. And in the return to play after concussions, those different levels are done up to 2 minutes. So we pushed it a little bit further, but having the players then focus and sort of activate their attention for longer periods of time. And it goes back to the same, like I said, physical training. You start off with 10 kilograms, and then, as the weeks go by, you can start lifting heavier and heavier. So that's what we try and improve with the players.
I think maybe if I want to ask you, because, we throw around this word a lot, or, coaches sometimes with the cognitive ability, the cognitive skills of a rugby player. If you can maybe just kind of like dumb it down a little bit and explain it maybe for parents or coaches like myself that doesn't have a big vocabulary. I've just learned new words on this podcast, like skill acquisition and all this fancy type of stuff. But if you can maybe explain, because I think it is important, there's a few things. We need to manage the cognitive load of players, because I think that is important. In France, we did a study a while back with the coaches on the charge mentale. So that means our mental loads. I don't know if it's the same thing. But if you can maybe just give us some brief example of what is the cognitive abilities we are talking about of the rugby, or the cognitive skills and the cognitive training. What are we trying to achieve?
Okay, so maybe I hope this could be a clear example, but, on a rugby field, you're going to be handling lots of different bits of information. So I always say you have to focus on the ball, you have to focus on the defender, you have to focus on your tactic, you have to focus on your teammates, and also on yourself. So I try and break it down to say that anything that we do on the field is sort of organized or run by our brain. So like I said, you've got to think of, not to give too many technical words, but the sort of the front part in our forefront, it's our, the prefrontal cortex. He's the guy sort of managing all the bits of information that come in, sending it to different parts of the brain to be able to function, to be able to make decisions, to be able to analyze. And the cognitive training basically then just trains your brain's capabilities of being able to do all those different sets of I don't know how to say it. I'm sorry, I'm losing my English now, but the ability to be able to do those different list of things to do. So what you want players to be able to do is to be able to treat, as many bits of information, but get that information as quickly as possible to the parts of the brain that will then be, put into action and to be able to react correctly. So that could be many different things. So sticking to the rugby, it would be being able to catch the ball, but then I've recognized there's space on the outside. So I need to maybe throw a skip pass to get to my teammate that is out there waiting for the ball. But to be able to do that, your brain needs to train to repeat that. So sometimes I think also to differentiate between doing in training 2-on-1s, so that'll be we'll train the player to fix the defender and pass to the open player. But in a game, that rarely happens. It's not going to be exactly the same way that you saw it happening at training. So what we need to do is we need to train the brain then to be able to identify that there's no longer a space on the outside, the space is on the inside. So what does that entail? That means I have to give a shorter pass to an inside player instead of throwing the long skip pass like I did in training to get past the defender. So it's being able to do the cognitive training is then being able to just train the brain to be able to give all those different instructions or signals to the rest of the body to be able to make quick, good decisions and then better, so that get the upper hand on your opposition or anything that you do in life. But I'm putting to the rugby sort of examples to be able to do it. So and I think that's part of what we're trying to do today is educate coaches, because when you hear cognitive, like you said, you get mixed up with too much on the mental, much on the brain. Are we talking about mental health? Are we talking about cognitive training, brain training? So one thing that we try and do is sort of break it down, make it a little bit more simple for the coaches, because I think it's a little bit of an abstract idea for certain coaches, and they don't understand it, so they don't know how to apply it, and then the benefits that can bring for them and for the players. So that's part of what we do. Like I said, try and share as much information on whether it be studies or things, in different sports. You can pick up on different sports where more and more cognitive training is coming into the performance side for the athletes, which is really good. And then to be able to share that with coaches and show them the benefits that it can bring for them and their players and as a team. And we speak about when you go to performance, a lot has been done on physical training. So lifting weights, how can you be physically ready to perform? Also nutrition, what are you going to eat to be able to perform better on the weekend? And I think now, slowly but surely, where everybody's looking for another way to become competitive, or get a competitive advantage, everybody's looking a little bit to the domain of, the mental side of things, the brain. And I think it's a passionate and exciting domain to go into, because I think we've we don't know everything about the brain. It's a little bit underestimated, but in that domain, I think there's going to be teams that take it seriously. Athletes that take it seriously are definitely going to have an advantage over the players. And we've heard of many, whether it's Djokovic in the tennis or some of the Olympic athletes that come out after, and they all talk about something that's got to do with, visualization, mental preparation, stress, handling stress. And that all comes down to that domain in when we're talking about, being mentally strong, and then getting that to be able to be a competitive advantage over your opposition is a domain that's sort of wide open for the moment. And the like I said, the players and coaches that take it not seriously, but spend a bit of time and learn a bit more and see how they can implement certain things for their players. And maybe what we're doing as cognitive training won't work, but there's other dimensions of developing mentally that will definitely help some different players and different teams.
It's very interesting, Brian, because it gets me thinking, because as coaches, what do we want? We want players to be able to taking information, but they need to process. And I remember years ago, I felt so stupid when we did that game of yours, and maybe we should have explained a bit more detail in the beginning with your ball. You did it earlier, and we'll do our best to put a picture on once the podcast is posted. But it's like you're having these different colors, and as Brian has explained, each color represents a skill when you touch your thumb on it. And I remember, Brian, you had me do something back then. Okay, if you touch this color, this is what you need to do, and you have to go to that cone. And it, sorry for my language, completely mindfucked me, and I was all over the place, and I felt so stupid. And it just shows you that we're not actually working on our brain, because at the end of the day, we want players to be able to make the right decisions, those split-second decisions, those under the pressure decisions. And even myself as a coach and also as an entrepreneur, I'm trying to manage my mental load or my cognitive load. I've identified now that there are certain tasks that needs to be done in the morning. I can't do it in the afternoon because it takes twice as long. And I do believe it's something, and you're right, we focus on S&C. You need to bench so much. You need to run this at the Bronco. We are setting these KPIs. And at the end of the day, rugby players are also human beings, and I think it's also important that we find a way also to measure their load if it is possible. What is the load that we are giving them back to back meetings? You got a front row meeting, you got a forwards meeting, you got a collective meeting, and like it gets a lot. Like I find sometimes players are more drained from the meetings than the actual training. Because why is the meeting important? It's important for us as coaches to transfer that. And what I've also realized, you're coming now to Andrew Huberman, it's got a brilliant podcast, and I like the way he dumbs it down because it's very scientific orientated. But even myself, like this is now my second day where I'm full on, Brian. So, and obviously I'm not coaching full time, but I'm doing a lot of consulting. I'm doing a lot of mentorships as well. And obviously I got the podcast, and I was on a few podcasts this week. And there was just stages that I felt overwhelmed because I had so much to do. But what helped me, and you just mentioned a method, is just by sitting still, just focusing on something. And what I would do, I wouldn't focus on something. I would just sit still and focus on my breathing. And I'll be honest with you, before I jumped on this podcast, I just finished a big working block, and I also had a bit of a lunch as well. And I was like, oh, I'm tired. But listen, I got Brian coming on. I got Brian, and I need to switch, so either I would listen to music or something like that. And I said, no, let me just sat for about 5 minutes, just focusing on my breathing. And just by doing those little small things or those small resets, it actually got me ready. It allowed me to review my notes, allow me to prepare for this podcast. And I do believe it's something that we can help rugby players, because sometimes rugby players make the wrong decisions because firstly they're tired, so they're no longer capable of absorbing that information. But where I think it's interesting, because Brian, you also not only help rugby players, you also, well, as we say in France, you do not interventions, but you consult in the corporate space. So I imagine not only are you sharing what you've learned as a rugby player, but you're also sharing the catch and think method in the corporate space. So I can imagine for someone managing a team, a huge project, or being a director or CEO, if I can improve the cognitive abilities of my employees, that could lead to so much more success. So now how do you orientate the catch and think method, which is a rugby ball, and with your methodology and obviously all your drills and exercises, how does that work for people in the corporate world? How can it help them?
So when we talk about rugby or in the sports world, we're talking about performance, and then we go over to the companies or the corporate world, and that will be productivity. So for anybody employing people, what do they like to hear? They like to hear that they are productive when they're working or during the hours that they're working. So we've seen, if you know how to manage and control your attention, you can actually be more productive in a shorter space of time than what most people are nowadays, because of interruptions, because of, so we say, it could be your environment, your workspace, your technology, so your cell phone or your computer, and then also your thoughts. These are things that can distract you. And, most of the companies that we go into, we'll say to them, how do you feel at the end of the day? That I was busy. I've been running around all day, but it doesn't feel like you got anything done because they haven't. So instead of focusing, like I said, the brain likes to do, a little bit lazy, likes to do one thing at a time. Instead of focusing on something and getting it done, and then feeling like you've accomplished something in the day, people will run around and multitask. So our brains are not multitaskers, doesn't like it. So that's where we sort of teach people to, focus on something, avoid the distractors, put your phone on, flight mode, or get into an office where you're not going to get distractions. Most people as well, when you hear them speaking, they say some of their best work is done early in the morning when you don't have your kids around, or you don't have, a text message coming through. So, that'll be sort of, and like you said, in the office space, meetings, too many meetings, it goes back to too much information. Your brain just says, I can't handle all of that. And then you get that fatigue that sets in, so day after day, week after week, that fatigue sets in, and then you start talking about burnouts or people that, just can't handle it anymore, make bad decisions because of the fatigue, because of that sort of clouded space in their brains that they can't, sort of focus on one thing at a time or get things done. And what we also do in the companies is work a lot with the guys that work on big machinery. So in the industrial side, where a lot of the accidents that, could happen, injuries that happen at work are because of a lack of attention or because they're not focusing on what they're doing at that particular point in time. So, we could be speaking, your listeners could be listening at this point, but they're thinking of, I need to pick the kids up from school this afternoon. What are we doing next week? I got to take the client for a service. Can be anything like that. So, once again, if you have to be focused on something, you have to be 100% focused on that to be able to be effective. And if you can do that, if you can manage, like again, once I said, your environment, your thoughts, and your technology, that means your attention is going exactly where you want it to be, and you can get things that you can get more done in less time. So you're more effective, you're more productive, you feel like you've done something at the end of the day. And not only that, you're feeling more refreshed, because what tires people down, I think, is the distractions in the workplace. It might be something really simple where you start something important, where you're focused on what you need to be doing, and a colleague or a text message comes up saying, "Did you have a good weekend?" "Yes, I had a good weekend." "Okay, see you later, maybe for lunch." But that little interruption, it's broken that cycle of focus that you had. And to get back, especially if you're doing something really important, so maybe people doing budgets or negotiations, when there's something really important to be done, if you do get distracted during that time or during that task, to get back to the same level of attention needed to be able to be efficient in that task could take anywhere up to 15, 20 minutes to get back to that level of attention. So there's lots of things. We give a lot of tips on how to be able to manage things like that, how to manage your emails, what to get done first in the day, So
should you guys use the ball with this, or do you guys give them a framework? How does that work?
Thanks for getting me back to that, G. So what we do is we'll explain it to them, we'll talk. And I think what's nice about what we do is we'll get the people then into action. So 99% of the people we work with in the companies know a little bit about rugby, never touched a rugby ball, but we get them up and they'll be using the ball. And what's interesting is we can talk about it, and maybe your listeners as well, and we can talk about attention, cognitive training. And I've seen this so many times with the coaches and people in companies as well that we work with, is until you've actually got the ball in your hands, like you did, exactly like you said, what did you do? You got the feeling of what it feels like to be bombarded with so many bits of information. Like you said, it was either the color, it was the skill, it was the tone. But that's what happens in a game, and that's what happens in your office, in your professional workplace as well. All the bits of information. So we just, it's nice to be able to, in a fun way, represent what actually happens to them in terms of their brain or their attention during their workday with a rugby ball, and different, levels of cognitive load that we can do with the ball. So once they get that feeling, the whole, the discussion that we had becomes more real to them, because they felt the cognitive load as such. But we're using the rugby ball and the catch and think method to be able to do so. So that's how we bring it in. And like I said, I've got the fun part. So, we work with different coaches also then, helping out on coaching or consulting, from a management point of view or in the companies. But one of the biggest things today, I think, is being able to handle and manage your attention well for whatever job you're doing. So I've got the fun part of being able to stop play with a rugby ball during the workday and share what was my passion, being rugby and experience like what we picked up as players. But most of all, making people aware of their attention and how to use it efficiently in their professional or corporate life.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. You're talking there about in the corporate space. Always, I mean, when was it last year? I hosted a 2-day seminar for a company in Spain. That was quite awesome, just outside of Barcelona. And, we spoke about the key priorities. And I think that's important as well, just to kind of, as coaches, I always tell the coaches, if you want players to do something well, I always say, write down everything that you want to share with them. Everything. You make a whole list, but you want to share with them this week. But then you only choose 3. You only choose 3 things that you want to deliver to the team, because at the end of the day, a lot of that information just gets lost. And I think, Brian, also with coming back to the corporate world, I think that's where a lot of people confuse things, between being busy and productive. productivity for me means executing the task that actually allows you to push the needle, to allow to move your project forward, to create business, to create sales and all those stuff. And you need to be in the right frame of mind to do that. And I think with what you're providing with your method, the catch and think method, I think that is brilliant because, I've been looking around for something. When I get that energy dip, I'm looking for ways to avoid it. So luckily I've been trying out a few things, and recently I've just gotten back on a ketogenic diet, for example. And I found that helps me with my cognitive ability and my cognitive load, which has been brilliant. But Brian, you're selling yourself short because, and this is the question I want to ask you, is because yes, you've created this great method, which is awesome, it's brilliant, and congratulations on that. But you've also learned some skills in the game, which you use and share when you're applying this into business or into the corporate space, when you're working with companies. What are the skills that you learned as a rugby player, which you are now applying when you're working with companies, when you're helping them to improve their cognitive ability, but also improving their productivity?
So explaining to them, how to handle, like I said before, what their attention is. I think from the point when people understand how it works, they're already more effective because you'll know exactly at the time when you're busy doing something at work, when you are distracted by something, that at that point in time you are getting distracted, but then how to sort of avoid that distractor and stay focused on what you're doing. So just from explaining it is already something important. And secondly, using the ball and getting that, that feeling and making them actually, experience that in a fun way makes it more realistic for them. And then things, like you said, all players, when we end up our playing careers, we don't actually know what we learned as players or being part of a team. So one of the things we talk a lot about is sometimes it's a lot of top-down management, someone that decides for you, someone that tells you what to do. And what we've seen is a lot of, in some of the companies that we work in, is that sometimes that the people on the ground, the people that are doing the job, the people that are sort of involved, they've got some good ideas, so you got to listen to what they've got to say, because these are the guys that are running the machines. These are the guys that are, they've got the experience. And I think sometimes we don't listen to what they've got to say to us. And sometimes it's very valuable, some of the info that can come sort of off the ground, So I just share with him that us as players in the teams that I was part of, is even when I was a youngster, when I got to Stade Français, I had just as much say as somebody like Christophe Dominici that had been in the club already for about 10 years, that had played for the French team. But I felt that I could also give a suggestion if I felt something, and everybody would discuss it. And the decision that will be made at the end is more of a team decision instead of a coach coming in and saying, this is what we're going to do on Saturday, So it's more a collective decision that we try and get into the people in the teams, the managers as well, being able to listen to their teams, give them a chance to express themselves, to give ideas, to exchange ideas. Often, one idea could make two. My uncle in South Africa has got the saying, 1 beer, 1 idea, 2 beers, 2 ideas. My wife says 3 beers, no more ideas. But so if everybody gives an idea, that might not be the final result, but it could lead to something else. But it's really, getting into companies and making them share what it's like to be part of a team, but also that everybody is important in that team. So that's one of the things that we work on quite a bit, and having like just discussion sessions with the people, because once again, like I said, the guys that are involved and that are actually doing the work have got some valuable insights that they can share, and sometimes it's good just to listen to them and make people feel a part of the team, and we were lucky enough to be part of teams, rugby teams. You have to include everybody, you're counting on everybody, and sometimes in companies maybe that gets you forget about that a little bit. I understand it, sometimes in the corporate companies you got to look after yourself, and you never know who's going to try and take your spot, but as much as possible, create a sort of a team environment. And then that gets onto your managers, your leadership. How do you lead teams? How do you consider people? Some of the times you're going to companies and they say it would be nice if I've worked a night shift on the weekend because somebody was injured or sick. It's nice if the manager comes in on a Monday morning and just pats me on the back and says thank you, or walks past and says hello. It's little things, so we try and also get to the management saying little things are important to people, so it's a little bit of everything. And sometimes I just explain what we did in a change room. We did have a team talk at halftime saying this didn't work, how can we get better for the second half? It's raining now, let's change our tactics. How can we adapt in the corporate world? Things change. I know when, back in the day in Stade Français, I think it's the same in the teams now. You'd have different blocks of the season. So you get through the first block. If it's gone well, you keep going. If it hasn't gone well, you need to adapt. So how can we adapt in a world that is changing faster and faster? We can go down to the discussion of artificial intelligence that's disrupting a little bit. So we need to be able to adapt, and for that you need to communicate. Leaders or managers also need to, incorporate everybody. So there's a lot of things, like you said, ex-rugby players. We've got some, how can I put it? Some good things to share with people, and it's nice to be able to have the opportunity to do that, and help the companies to be better. Once again, that productivity, anybody that can go to work and be happy and productive at the same time, then if we can add to that a little bit in a small way, that's really enriching.
Yeah, and there's so many lessons and there's so many parallels. And when I consult in the corporate space as well, Brian, I always tell, if, as a rugby player, we all have different roles, and then it comes down to the mindset: just do your job. That's all. If every single player just does his job, and then you need to actually go a bit further. What is that? Doing your homework, doing your skill work, doing your extra work, doing your ball handling skills, making sure you're putting in your work-ons, your extras, going through the game plan, reviewing. Just do your job. You got to roll in that system. You just got to execute it. And we often see when players start explaining to other teammates how to do their jobs, that's where things go wrong. And it's important. And when I share that analogy in the corporate, they kind of get it, because then they're like, oh yeah, but this guy's always telling me to do this. And then some people are like, oh shit, I actually do that a lot. I should just be focusing on it. And I think in terms of the ecosystem of a team, where a team works, is when every single person in a team is doing their job exceptionally well. And I think also, from a team environment, is like also asking yourself, instead of telling people what to do something, asking them, how can you help? How can you help them? How can you be of assistance? I think it's those small type of things. But Brian, we're coming towards the end, but this is a question I've written down, which I didn't ask because you were sharing brilliant. I feel we can speak for hours on this, because I think it's a really interesting topic, not just in the world of rugby and sports, but life in general, because we all want to be productive so we can chase our goals, so that we can turn our vision into reality. But what interests me is, because when I was in that transition period, I had an idea of what I wanted to do and go about it, but I didn't know how to put it into place. And obviously now today, I've done a full-on rebrand of this podcast called the Coach G Show. There's a method behind the madness. There is some great stuff coming in the near future. So now today, I know what to do, and I'm still learning. And one of the biggest objectives for me now is taking this podcast, Brian, going into in-person podcasts. But in order to do that, I need to get sponsors on board. So that's, for example, something that I'm still learning. So by the way, if you have any advice for me on how to get sponsorships, I'd love that. But what I would like to know is, when the concept of play ball back then, which transformed into catch and think, how did you turn that idea into a business? Because we all have this, and this is where a lot of rugby players are lost. Retired players, they have this idea, and sometimes it's a brilliant idea, but they don't know what vehicle they should use to get to that destination. So I don't know if there's a few pointers. I know it's a very tough and a complex question, but maybe you can give some insights from your experience.
Maybe, G, I think, when we're playing rugby, we're very self-dependent. You're dependent on your own physical progress, performance, so you sort of master, we've over the years, so you would have started playing rugby at whatever age where you're young, and then you're getting to the professional, the professional side of the game. And I think during all of that, you might have some good advice from coaches or, players or coaches that it's easier or, more difficult to work with. But you sort of get through it being sort of self-dependent. And even though it's still a team game, I always say to it's, when you're playing for your salary, you're playing for the next contract, you want to be number one. So in a way, in general, like what I'm trying to say is that you're self-dependent. Your results depend on yourself. You might depend on your team to win a championship, but to get the contract or to be number one in your position depends on yourself. When you move out of that into sort of an unknown world, I think what is good is, and I've heard a few podcasts or advice is, get a mentor, get somebody that's done it before, somebody that can advise you, somebody that can. So I think that's maybe one of the good things, and I was very lucky, and Dominique very well as well. That helped me from her experience as well, is to transform my idea into a business side. And you mentioned before, you said everybody just do your job. I can tell you now, I'm not a salesman. I can't sell anything. I just want to give everything away because I get emotionally attached to a kid or somebody in the company, and I want to give him all the rugby balls and I want to help them. So just do your job. So stick to what I'm good at. I'm good at maybe now explaining what attention is, cognitive training, getting the drills on, doing the practical side of it. But, sending invoices, doing the marketing, selling to people is not my strong point. So I think two things. If you've got an idea and you want to transform it, get advice from somebody in the same field or somebody that's done it before. So that'll be good. And then secondly, stick to what you're good at, for whatever your idea is. If you're good at, and I think a good idea would obviously be born out of passion or something that you're interested in. So stick to what you're good at, sort of surround yourself with people that are trustworthy. I think as well, I think quite a bit of times, we sort of get lured into situations where people try and take advantage of you when you're in the limelight. So it might be a little bit easier once you stop playing because you don't have all these people around you trying to get a piece of you. So get somebody that's trustworthy, somebody that's, once again, like I said, done it before, and just stick to what you know and what you're good at. And I think could be a sort of a good equation to be able to at least get you in the right direction.
Oh, wow. Thanks for that, Brian. You've shared so many gems and dropped a lot of bombs there as well, knowledge bombs, which is brilliant. And I do hope the players and the coaches that are listening, that they acknowledge us. But Brian, we've come to the end of this podcast. It was unbelievable. Just want to say thanks for taking the time. And just maybe if the audience, if they want to reach out to you, whether they are a rugby team or player, and I do know you have online courses, you also do in-person consulting. Is there a way they can reach out to you? Would that be through the Catch and Think website or through Instagram, LinkedIn?
Catch and Think website, I think catchandthinkacademy.com.
Okay.
So like I said, the academy, because we've got different training courses in all the different domains. But then I'm also quite active on social media, so Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Contact me anytime or through your community as well, It's anybody can get in touch. I mean, we'll be in touch as well. So it's quite easy to find me, and I'll be more than happy to, exchange ideas, find out more about what people that are doing, some of the things that are difficult when they experience with their team, with coaching players. And only thing that I can then maybe try and help them is bring in a dimension and explain to them, certain things in terms of how the brain functions and, how to progress or develop, be performant or productive. So I'm always happy to chat and exchange ideas. I'm still learning, that's another good thing, is it's such a vast domain. We're learning more and more about the brain every day, but it's passionate, and whatever I've learned so far that I can share with anybody, it'll be more than a pleasure.
Now, definitely need to get you on, Brian, onto my community on School. It's an amazing platform. I've got a community there of almost 700 motivated people, players, coaches, everyday people. Need to get you on to talk a bit about this. That would be unbelievable. And for the viewers and the listeners, if you want to join my private community, which is absolutely free, it's called Coach G Level Up. You can either check the link in the description of this podcast, whether it's on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, or very simple, you can just drop me a DM on Instagram with the word community, and you will get an automated message sending you the link to join, and I will accept your request. Brian, brother, it's been an absolute pleasure. I don't think we've spent this much time together without a friendly drink, like you would used to call it, some tarike. And we definitely need to create a reunion soon while you're still here in France. And all of the best for the rest of your travels while you're here, because you're no longer living in France. You're living now in the paradise. So, but please also send on my love to Dominique. She's always impressed me as a human being, very intelligent woman, and you are very privileged to have her with you and helping you on this journey. And I do believe you guys make an unbelievable team. So thanks for taking the time, and please pass on my best wishes.
Okay, G, thanks very much. Same to you and all the family, and it's been good, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, man. Ciao, ciao. Bye-bye.
Yeah.